My name is Jim Farley, and this is Drive.
I did from Indiana with my LS Swap 240SX, no air conditioning, no nothing. Drove cross country, kept only what I could keep in this car. Ended up getting stuck in a sandstorm through Nevada, and I had to keep the windows up. It was like 100 degrees. It was blistering.
Now that is so weird you say that, because I got caught in a sandstorm in Nevada, and
Really?
my lights went out. I somehow got contaminated in my lights, and and I don't know how they got in there, but my lights would go on and go off, and you see these tumbleweeds and sand going across the road, and you're like, I'm not sure I'm going to make it, but that's fine. Welcome my guest, Emelia Hartford. She's an influencer on YouTube, yes. She modifies her own cars, yes. But she's so much more than that. She represents the future of the car industry. So I wanted to just get an insight, because I'm fascinated with these things. I watched your content on, I know you didn't intend to wind up where you are, but you are a big influencer now. Like my daughter, Grace, is 14, going on 15. She watches your videos. She's a dirt biker, but she loves your content.
Oh, that means so much. Yeah, when I started, I definitely did not expect to build the audience and the following that I do today. But over the course of 6 years, as long as an incredible team that I've built and brought up along with me, has been able to scale this incredible company that I'm so incredibly grateful for, because I get to travel the world, build cool cars, and see some pretty amazing people.
It's not like you start out to do that, like you said. So you got to tell me about the names of your cars, because one of the things I noticed is like you love naming your cars.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do that in life. So what is your criteria to name a car, or does it just come to you?
So I was never a huge car namer, let's say. When I had my G35, that was the first car I ever got. But I never got too into names. But when I started YouTubing, it kind of built this character around the cars that we were building, and people loved that. And so my 240 now, her name is Envy. Envy stood for non-vegetarian because she likes the meat, because she's a drift car, meat being the tires.
Got it.
And also it kind of could play off on green with Envy. And my Buick Regal was actually named after my grandma, Mimi, because the car came from her. And from there, we just kind of have fun with it. My C8 Corvette named Phoenix because the car caught on fire and she resurrected from the dead, from the ashes, quite literally. And yeah, it's more just having fun and seeing the fun things that we can come up with that also keeps the audience engaged and interested and creates a personality. And then we almost have a bond, me and the audience, because it's something that, they come up with a name sometimes too. And it's almost easier to refer to a car also by a name than, specking out exactly what the motor is and what, chassis and all that each time. So it's also a little bit of ease as well. But yeah, when it comes to naming cars, we try to have fun with it.
I have to say that is a really awesome answer, because it's actually not one thing or the other. It's a combination of things. And I have to tell you, of all the car people that I've kind of virtually met, you have more know-how around what you've modified your car and the way you describe the modifications than almost anyone I've ever met. And so I can understand why simplifying, the car instead of describing all the mods, which probably goes through your brain, is like a really quick way. Okay, that makes total sense now. Now I got it.
Yeah. And a lot of it too for content is just reeling it back a little, because I want it to be enjoyable for someone who may be very experienced in automotive space, and then also Grace, when she tunes in to watch the vlog, that's something that anyone at any level, whether they're new getting into cars, whether experienced veterans, can tune in and enjoy and understand what's going on.
I got it. So I have to ask you, what got you into cars? Like I want to go back to Indiana or your early life. Like, what got you into cars in the first place? How did this whole thing start?
Yeah. Well, right before I was supposed to turn 16 years old, my dad actually passed away. Mm-hmm. And, to my knowledge, he wasn't a car guy. Didn't really run in the family. Mm-hmm. And, it kind of made me realize that at a young age, I was going to have to make some tough decisions on my own. And, I remember crying in my finance class thinking, man, I don't have a dad to teach me these things. And that was kind of the moment where I was like, all right, well, I should start teaching myself. And the first major decision was what car I was going to buy myself. And, I spent a lot of time on the internet, Googling and researching, kind of like how I still do to this day. But instead, I was on the forums they're a little biased towards, more race cars than anything. And the internet told me I had to get something bigger than a 4-cylinder. It had to be manual and it had to be rear-wheel drive. And that's how I decided on the G35. And then it was probably 2 weeks after buying that car that my mom told us that we were going to be moving to Indiana. And that was definitely a culture shock. But I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I loved the people, the car community. They ended up being a fatherly figure for me in a way. And they really stepped in and pulled me out of a dark time. And instead of partying on the weekends, we're doing turbo swaps and working on engines. And it just gave me the sense of family that I felt like I had lost after losing my dad. And from there, unfortunately, on the way back from the racetrack, I was hit at a standstill with a G35 that was totaled. But I felt confident in what I wanted to do next. Was I wanted to stay in the Infiniti, Nissan, JDM family. So I wanted to get a 240SX, but it had to have that American muscle in it.
Yeah,
so I ended up with the LS because that's kind of what the crew was into at the time. But and I got that car, and we started working on that to help me get on the road. And it was once she was running that's when I decided to go cross country. I think I just, more than anything, like when I first got a stick, I'd never driven a stick a day in my life. I didn't know what I was doing. I rested the clutch on the way home. But I just wanted to perfect it. It kept my mind off things. There's only really 2 times I ever feel truly in the moment where I'm not having thoughts. And it's when I'm acting, of course, I'm having thoughts as a character. But in that moment, I feel so present, and when I'm behind a wheel. And when I'm behind a wheel, I just wanted to perfect things. Like I wanted to heel toe, rev match, downshift, everything, and learn how to come out of corners quicker at a higher RPM. And when I moved to Indiana, it was, all right, so now let's make these faster. Like, what more can we do? I remember driving my G35 up on a curb because I didn't know how to jack it up, and just crawling underneath the curb and just tinkering with a wrench, oh, what's this do? What will happen if I take this off? Just because I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to do, but I wanted to do something. So that kind of struck that. And yeah, I really, without the B crew, Bloomington crew from Indiana, I don't know where I'd be today.
That's interesting. Actually, we're not very different. I got to LA because my wife was an actress. She was my girlfriend then. And I worked in a car restoration shop, probably the best one in the country at the time, run by Phil Hill, who was the first American Formula One champion. And I was a janitor there. And I was fine with being a janitor because they worked on the most beautiful cars in the world, Delahaye, Delage, all the French custom-built coachwork vehicles in the 20s and 30s. I got a PhD in the car business, not because I went to graduate school, because I was around other people making $70 an hour as painters and interior people and motor people. It's not any different than your B crew, no different. We're a lot more alike than you would imagine. So, and I would have no surprise at all if I could come back to the earth and you were running Ford Motor Company. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So one question I have to ask is maybe more general. Is how do you get the courage or where did the courage in your life come from where you dive into these projects, often without any kind of concrete technical knowledge, and you've always figured it out? I'm sure if we went through all the cars, I'd prove that assumption out. But you're really courageous. Like, you do all the work yourself. Nothing scares you, it seems like. What was it? Where's that from? I will say now I have an incredible team who helps because the progress of YouTube, of
the progress is unrealistic when people want to see a build beginning to end in like 2 week span. So I'm very fortunate that I've built a team now, but I definitely started doing everything on my own, and everything is self-taught. I've had incredible mentors as I've progressed through these years, and it scares me. It really does, working on a car that I've never worked on before. And as I've gotten older, you start to realize they're all the same. But it's petrifying to feel like you can mess something up and not know how to fix it or put it back together, and then you're in a worse situation than when you started. But I just really fell in love with taking something apart to replace it with something better, to make it go faster. And that feeling you get when it works, it's almost undescribable unless you've been able to experience it yourself, which I'm sure you can relate to. And don't get me wrong, there's been times where I've stripped a ball and I'm like, oh God, how am I going to get out of this? But I do a lot of research online. I try to do as much research beforehand. I always try to make sure I have all the parts ordered for every build before I really dive into it. So I can really just focus on one at a time in order to just keep everything going along smoothly. But it can definitely be daunting at times. And I see it out of other people when they get scared to work on their own car, because they're more scared to do something wrong than anything. But it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to do it wrong. And this community and this industry that we're in is so incredible that everyone is there to help you. It's like one big family.
Actually, changing Ford isn't so different. I keep telling my team, just keep walking, just keep going.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience personally. My parents weren't car people, but I was. So anyways, I was very fortunate because I always found car people no matter where I lived. But I had the idea when I was 14 or 15 to buy an old Mustang. I got a job in an engine remanufacturing plant in City of Industry in LA, and my parents flew me out there for the summer, and I found a car in a junkyard, and it had a blown motor, shackles on the back. It was like this really bad looking 70s 60s race drag racing car, all jacked up in the back. And
that was your first car?
Yeah, my first car. So I didn't have any money, so I slept in it. I had to save my work money for the motor, and I happened to work in a plant that rebuilt Ford motors. So I rebuilt I would wait after the factory shut down, and I built my own motor. I had no idea what I was doing. And then, some nights I just would be done so late, it wouldn't make sense to take the bus or get a ride home from my uncle, so I would just sleep in the car. And anyways, I drove it home without telling my parents. I sold my plane ticket and bought gas, and I waited till the last minute, and I left a bunch of spark plug wires off. I got terrible gas mileage, and I got stuck in Las Vegas. Anyways, it was a great experience. And like you said, working on that car was the beginning for me. It was like the best thing ever happened. It was so satisfying when I got to Michigan. My parents were totally upset.
It's funny. I kind of did the opposite. I didn't live
the opposite from Indiana, right?
I did from Indiana with my LS Swap 240SX, no air conditioning, no nothing. Drove cross country, kept only what I could keep in this car. Ended up getting stuck in a sandstorm through Nevada, and I had to keep the windows up. It was like 100 degrees. It was blistering. And that's what I ended up driving to California. I would drive that car at auditions, showing up just dripping in sweat.
Now that is so weird you say that, because I got caught in a sandstorm in Nevada, and my lights went out. They kept going out because the sand would get in
the bezel or something. Yeah,
like somehow get contaminated in my lights, and and I don't know how they got in there, but my lights would go on and go off, and you see these tumbleweeds and sand going across the road, and you're like, I'm not sure I'm going to make it, but that's funny. Yeah.
I had to pull over after that and do an oil change because it was she was hurting a little bit after that.
Good, nothing better for her than an oil change. That's smart. So what do you think your legacy will be? Do you think the legacy will be the cars or the people that you touch, or what do you think will be the afterglow of what you're doing right now?
It's so interesting that you asked that question, because I've actually been talking about that on my YouTube channel as of lately. And as I'm getting older, I understand I'm still young, but as I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize that life, it's not forever. And I've known that. I lost my father when I was young. You know, I think more than anything, I just hope I can make change for good and inspire a younger generation. I think that's at the end of the day, I hope to do good on this earth. I hope I can help anyone I can, especially the younger generation with cars, because, as we've talked, the future is a little uncertain, and I think I'm still figuring out legacy as I go. But right now, I'm very into doing what I can to help.
Makes perfect sense. I look back, maybe the opposite look, and I'm most thankful for Yoshinabu, who gave me a chance at Toyota, and all the other people who actually had the exact same view. Yeah, I think the way that you work on cars with so many other people and are thankful for all the surprising twists and turn of their help, I think is an incredible legacy, because you're giving people confidence to start a project without them having all the answers, and relying on other people's kindness and insight and knowledge to kind of help them get it done. And I think that our world needs a lot more of that.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to hear.
My name is Jim Farley, and this is Drive. I have to say, just as a Ford person, I noticed, other than your Ferrari, you couldn't even leave the Ferrari stock. You had to change the exhaust system. But the Ford is kind of like the only kind of car that's kind of stock. But then you promised all of us that you're going to do something radical with it. I heard 1,000 horsepower. I don't know if that's on the plan. So you just got to give me a private update of where that thing's going, that project.
I'll give you a quick rundown. I'd wanted to stick with the Coyote engine, the 5-liter, and I wanted to do a root style big blower. And unfortunately, it was a little costly, and I think we could have fabricated something to make it work. But at the end of the day, for the horsepower numbers I was going for, I'm shooting for about 2,000. We decided at the end of the day to do a big block Ford. I decided, I should keep it in the Ford family if I was going to do something like that. Yeah. And yeah, so it fit. Okay, this part people don't know, but by the time this comes out, I'm sure people have seen. But it,
and it fit, no problem.
It fit actually really well. So there's a lot of room in that engine bay.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, we've used that platform for a long time. So yeah, well, what other questions do you have for me, the CEO of Ford?
I have techie questions, but I'll go through that another time. I am curious more to hear about, I guess, your story and where you are today.
Look, cars are all that I cared about. All my relationships in my life mostly came from mutual love of cars. I was a self-taught person in terms of working on cars. My father was a banker. He didn't really care about cars at all. We moved around a lot. I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and moved to the States. I lived in Montreal, Canada. So I've been around a lot of places, and so I saw a lot of different kinds of people in different kind of conditions. But I always loved cars, and it's been the number one motivator. My biggest fear when I was your age is to go into the car business, because I thought, because it's a business, it would ruin my love of cars. So there was no job like no business I could build like yours. So it's either you're working in a gas station or you work in a car company. There wasn't really anything in between. So I worked at IBM because I really liked technology. Out of college, I ran the computer lab at Georgetown, my school, and I got really into computers. And but I was always working. I had a 5-liter Mustang GT after my 65 I traded in, and that was my real passion. And during the day, I funded it by working at IBM. And then I went to graduate school, and I worked at JP Morgan in corporate finance, and I did not like it. And I said to myself, I'm going to do what I love. I'm going to go in the car business. And my biggest decision that I made that was a smart one is I got offers from every car company, and I went to Toyota. My family was not happy about that. My dad was a veteran. My grandfather was an hourly worker for Ford. And so I was kind of in a way, outcast. And I started working at Toyota and, at Lexus, and we came up with the first Lexus, the Coupe, then the RX, then I got put over at Toyota, and I started working on coming up with the ideas of the 92 Camry, which was a breakthrough. We localized it in Kentucky, and, I just kept working on cool new cars. And then I went to Toyota of Europe, got to come up with all sorts of really cool cars there. I got to learn about the European business, and then I came back and I worked in dealers, and then I got put in charge of Scion, which is probably my big break. And, I've always been, I would say, on the very outer edges of the really new projects at these car companies. And when everyone else said, oh, that's a really risky job, don't go to Scion, I was like,
I volunteer for tribute.
Yes, I always volunteered for the kind of the most hazardous jobs because I felt like I could learn the most.
Yeah,
and,
that's true though. That really is where you learn the most.
Yep. And I made a lot of mistakes. I remember going to Europe. I didn't know anything about European cars, and I would spend hours every weekend in parking lots at malls taking pictures of like trying to understand the diesel market and different displacements and what kind of interior. So I'm just like you. I love cars.
Yeah. This is an odd question, and this is part of the work-life balance, but do you find it's hard to turn off when it's time to go to sleep? Do you feel like you're constantly thinking about work, or have you kind of gotten to a routine where now you're able to turn off once you leave the building, or does it ever really turn off?
Not for me. Not for this job. Yeah. The greatest thing for me is my kids and my wife are really close, and so they keep me really grounded because I'm just dad. They don't care what my job is. So I'm grounded, but I can't leave this job at the door.
Yeah.
So I have to come back to the last question, which is your legacy, because you're such a successful person. You built this great business. You have all these wonderful people on your team and people you've known. What's next? Where are you taking it all?
It's a good question. I try not to be too nearsighted. I always try to look, 5-10 years in the future. And
I see.
I never see myself not working on cars and doing builds and getting new chassis and constantly trying to push them to their limits, because I found the most fun in learning the new technology and seeing what I can do with it and what the car is capable of. Also, I think producing higher, nicer cinematography style stuff, be it, car-based movies even. And I'd like to start doing different forms of racing to get to really experience everything. And right now I'm trying to I've almost successfully built one of every type of genre of car, but I think it's just constantly trying to push the envelope of what I'm doing. And to be honest, when I was younger, YouTube didn't even exist. So I can only imagine, what else is going to come up along the way. But I think I get so much joy out of doing what I do and building cars that I don't really see that going anywhere. I think it's going to be more, the challenges of horsepower and how much more do you keep pushing and just always finding that limit. I think that's where I get the most joy.
Got it. I've met a lot of people in this business. I've been so fortunate. I met pretty much every one of my heroes. And literally there's one other person that literally said the exact same thing to me when I asked him the question. Yeah, Carroll Shelby.
Really? Wow.
Exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Honor to even have my name affiliated with that.
You remind me a lot of him, actually.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, I kind of see you as a modern Carroll Shelby who's going to change his industry. I can't wait to see what you do.
I'm speechless. Thank you.
And I'm a subscriber, and I'll keep watching. And I can't wait to see what's around the next corner, and I can't wait to see that Mustang. But congratulations on all your success. Consider the CEO of Ford a fan, and someone you can always get a hold of. And I wish you nothing but the success, and I really enjoyed our chat today, and I can't imagine how proud your father must be of you.
Thank you. That means a lot. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate you having me on here, and it was really nice speaking with you.
Yep, same. Right back at you.
Drive is produced by Jesse Baker and Eric Newsom of Magnificent Noise for Spotify. Chris Curtin is consulting producer. Our production staff includes Julia Knott and Eva Walchover, with help from Lori Arpin, Jeff Nelson, Josh Malofsky, Darnell Macon, and Mark Truby. Special thanks to Liz Kellogg and Matt Lieber. Jim Farley is the host, and this is Drive.